"You think you own this lane? Get off my road." Cole Anders snarled, the white SUV lunging at Jamal Price, until an unmarked gray sedan, knifed between steel and skin, dashed light blooming red-blue as Detective Alana Ruiz's voice cracked the air. "Police hands where I can see them. Now." The evening air felt like a cool palm against Jamal Price's cheek as he threaded his bike through downtown Riverton. He knew the rhythm of the lights here, the way Jefferson went green in a wave, the way the river threw back a copper wash right before dusk. He was 27 and fast, a courier whose legs had memorized the city better than most drivers ever would. 2 more deliveries, then home to Sienna's apartment where her new puppy had already learned to sleep against his ankles. He was rolling past warehouse brick and taco truck smoke when a white SUV muscled up beside him, pacing too close. Jamal drifted toward the curb to signal for space. The SUV's engine answered by growling. The driver's square jaw, red at the neck, leaned toward the window. Jamal couldn't hear the words over wind, but he read lips. "Get off the road." "Share the lane," Jamal called, steady. He did not knock on the window, did not spit, did not perform anything that would later be called provocation. He pedaled smoother, lighter, holding the line. The SUV swerved. Not adrift, an abrupt, deliberate bump, steel shoulder into bone. Jamal's front wheel snapped toward the curb. His knee grazed stone. His vision stuttered. Mailbox, tire, sky. Instinct yanked him upright. He overcorrected and found the lane again, heart bucking, lungs chasing themselves. He was ready to angle into the next turn when the SUV leapt forward and crossed him hard, cutting him off so close he could count the bug splatters on its bumper. The driver braked, then only pretended to hold it, creeping his car backward like a threat, inch by grinding inch toward Jamal's shins. Time braided into strands. A bus hissed somewhere behind him. A teen laughed across the street and then stopped. Traffic hummed and then thinned, as if the city were stepping back to make room for this moment. A new sound ripped through the block, sharp and animal, a siren bark. A gray sedan, unremarkable, windows clean but not tinted, exploded from a side street and fish-tailed broadside between bike and SUV, its chassis a wall. The sedan's wheels bit hard and held. The driver's window dropped. A small flip-light pulsed red-blue from the dash. "Police!" A voice shouted, hoarse, close, no theatrics. "Hands where I can see them." Jamal put a foot down. Breath punched through him. He gulped it like he'd been underwater. He saw the SUV driver's face plainly, now late 40s, maybe sun-worn, the posture of a man who expected the world to be a minor inconvenience that moved when he told it to. He gripped the wheel with both hands and almost smiled. The unmarked sedan's door opened. A woman stepped out, medium height, dark hair, pulled into a no-nonsense knot. Detective Alana Ruiz, though Jamal would learn her name later. Badge clipped to her belt, left hand out in a calm, open palm, right hand resting near her holster without drama. "You driver of the white Yukon," she called, voice carrying clean. "Vehicle in park, engine off, now." The man didn't move. "Sir," Ruiz said closer, "eyes on me. Put it in park." The driver flicked his gaze from Jamal to the detective and back again, as if choosing a target. His right shoulder rolled barely. Jamal's stomach dropped. The SUV lurched in a sudden reverse, bumper kissing the detective's quarter panel with a dull thud before straightening. Ruiz didn't flinch. She stepped into the windshield's circle of vision and planted her stance. "This is done," she said louder. "Do not make this worse." The teen on the corner had his phone up now. A bus driver stood on his steps, watching. Jamal's hands trembled on his bars, so he shook them out and stood taller. He fought the urge to apologize to no one. The driver's smile thinned into something else, something colder. He moved his lips again. Jamal did not need the sound to understand the word this time. Detective Ruiz's chin lifted. "Sir," she said slower, "shut the engine off." The driver's hand reached for the shifter. Ruiz moved 1 step, 2, quick as math. Her palm slapped the hood just loud enough to command attention. Her other hand flashed and the dashboard lights behind her burst brighter. Another siren closer answered from up the block. An echo of authority multiplied. Jamal felt the moment tip. He felt it in the driver's jaw twitch, in the way bystanders settled into silence, in the tiny nod an old man gave Ruiz from a stoop. Like this was the right fight at the right time. The driver's hands finally rose, slow. The engine clicked off. Ruiz called it in, voice steady. Another cruiser slid to the curb. Jamal let himself breathe, long and raw. "You hurt?" Ruiz asked, without taking eyes off the SUV. Jamal stared at his knee. Blood pooled, but didn't surge. "I'll live," he said, and heard how thin his voice was. "You will," she said, and it was neither prediction nor promise, just a fact. She holstered the moment, not the weapon, and took the driver into custody with a choreography that protected everyone's body, including the man's. When the cuffs clicked, the driver finally looked at Jamal, like he wanted to memorize him. "You think this is over?" he said, low and soaked in contempt. "You think I don't know where?" Ruiz turned his body away before the rest could land. The teen's phone caught it all, the near-ram, the block, the word no one needed to hear on audio to know. The detective glanced over at Jamal's bike, front rim kissing the curb like a cracked smile. "We'll need your statement," she said, "and a medic for that knee." "Yeah," Jamal said. His breath steadied into something like a rhythm again. "Yeah." As the ambulance pulled in and the cruiser eased away with the man in the back seat, the city returned to itself. Car horns rose and faded. Sunlight slipped off glass like caution tape unspooling. Jamal touched the scuffed bar tape with 2 fingers and felt the tremor that would find him later when the adrenaline left. He didn't yet know the name Cole Anders or the word repeat, or how quickly a video could mutate into a story that tried to swallow the truth of it. He only knew that a stranger with a badge had put a car between him and the kind of hate that wants to make a point with blood. He watched the unmarked sedan's taillights, then closed his eyes for a second that stretched too long. When he opened them, Ruiz was looking at him, not through him, at him, and nodding once, like I saw it too. And in that nod lived both a warning and a beginning. The hospital's fluorescent hum made everything feel like it was happening underwater. Jamal sat on a paper-covered bed while a nurse named Victor rinsed grit from his knee. The sting drew tears that he blinked back more from pride than pain. He texted Sienna, "I'm okay. Knee got chewed up. Long story." She replied in 3 seconds, "Where are you?" He sent a pin and added, "Don't bring the puppy." She wrote back a string of exclamation points anyway. Detective Ruiz arrived with a soft knock and a clipboard. She didn't look at much. Up close, Jamal could see the lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her shoulders settled a little when she sat as if hanging up a coat after a long day. "I'm glad you let the medics look," she said. "I'm Alana." "Jamal." She asked him to tell it plain, and he did. The chase, the swerve, the backing bumper, the word mouthed like a secret you use to test the air for how much poison it can hold. He kept his voice steady. He did not perform gratitude or anger for her. He didn't have the energy. When he finished, Ruiz nodded and let the silence sit until it felt honest. "The driver's name is Cole Anders," she said. She didn't make a face when she said it, didn't roll her eyes, didn't telegraph anything. "We're booking him on assault with a deadly weapon vehicle counts and reckless endangerment. The assistant DA on call is awake." Jamal started to laugh, then swallowed it because it came out like a choke. "Deadly weapon," he repeated, glancing at his knee. "A 2-ton SUV counts," Ruiz said gently. "You don't have to be in a morgue for it to be a weapon." Sienna arrived in a rain of worry and perfume. She wrapped Jamal up carefully, like she was afraid of breaking him, then turned to Ruiz and said, "Thank you," with a weight that tried to carry both gratitude and the history of a city. Ruiz took it without ceremony. "Mr. Anders has a lawyer coming," Ruiz added, shifting her attention smoothly to the logistics that keep a person from spinning. "He'll be arraigned tomorrow morning." Our office will be in touch about a protective order if you want one. Jamal frowned. A protective order? Ruiz chose her words. It's common for road rage incidents to bleed over into home harassment messages, drive-bys. I don't know Mr. Anders yet, but he looked at you with intent. Intent, Sienna repeated, tasting it. Victor finished taping the gauze and slid away, leaving the three of them like a makeshift circle. Jamal stared at his scraped hands. I've been hit before, he said, voice light in the way people use when they're trying to argue with reality. You ride long enough, somebody opens a door without looking, somebody texts through a stop. You bounce. You get back on. This wasn't a mistake, Ruiz said. Something cracked then, small but unmistakable. Jamal pressed his tongue to the back of his teeth until the pressure steadied him. No, he said. It wasn't. The first pings came before they left the hospital. The teen's video hit the neighborhood chat and then sprinted across Riverton in that compressed way attention travels now. 3 shares, then 30, then 3,000. Jamal's phone began to twitch like a live wire unknown numbers friend of a friend check-ins. The cousin he hadn't heard from in a decade sending 3 words. You good, man? He should have turned the notifications off. Instead, he watched the world argue over the shape of his near death. Some believed what they saw, a man using a machine like a weapon and a detective interposing a car like a shield. Others had edits already in their drafts. The clip starts too late. The cyclist must have done something earlier. Those courier kids ride like they own the city. The driver probably feared for his life. There were probably other angles we don't see. There were other angles, of course. The dash cam in Ruiz's sedan, the security camera on Jefferson Liquor, the bus's forward-facing lens, and, later, body cam footage from uniformed officers who arrived when the adrenaline had cooled. But this first night, the argument hopped from bar stool to living room to comment thread, and Jamal's name became something people used without the dignity of asking him what it felt like to wear it. At 2:11 another text came in from an unknown number with no avatar. You made me look like a monster, it read. We both know you cut me off. You almost made me wreck. You think I won't? The sentence ended there. Maybe the sender thought better of it. Maybe his battery died. Maybe it was performative restraint. Jamal stared until the letters fuzzed. Sienna took the phone and held it like she might hold a shaking bird. Block it, she said. It'll just come from somewhere else. Block it anyway. He did. He blocked 5 more before he fell into a sleep that was less rest than collapse. Ruiz worked the back end of the night the way detectives do when the adrenaline has nowhere to go. She secured video, wrote a report that avoided adjectives, logged the mouth-formed slur without printing it on paper because she'd learned how some words stain records forever. She sent an email to the DA with bullet points that read like bones. Vehicle's lateral movement indicates intent. Defendant reversed toward victim after cutoff. Witness corroboration consistent. Unmarked block prevented likely grievous injury. At 5:07 she drove past the intersection on her way home, because sometimes you check the place again to prove to yourself it's just concrete. The skid marks looked like underlines. A man with a broom was washing blood Jamal's, small and ordinary, toward the drain. Ruiz parked and watched the water carry red into the grid. She turned her badge face down on the passenger seat and let the silence sit. By morning, someone had posted a photo of Jamal's damaged front rim propped against a hydrant with 2 words, "He lives." That was the first sentence of the story that would try with hands too many and too clumsy to carry everything that came next. They released Cole Anders on bond before breakfast. His lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Dwyer, whose vowels sounded like polished wood, stood on the courthouse steps and said phrases into microphones. Misunderstanding. Aggressive cyclist. My client feared for his safety. Behind him, Anders wore a golf shirt and humility like a rental he had no intention of returning. The teen who filmed flinched at the way cameras found Anders' unremarkable face and lifted it into broadcast. Jamal didn't watch the press conference live. He was at Sienna's kitchen table with coffee he couldn't taste, watching his front wheels spin on a truing stand he'd borrowed from a friend. The bent rim made a wobble sound like a heart that can't decide whether to race or rest. He tightened a nipple a quarter turn, listened, adjusted again. Fixing metal was easier than fixing how your body learned in one blink that the world can decide to crush you just because it wants to. "Turn that off," Sienna said, appearing like she does quiet, already moving toward his comfort before he knows he needs it. She thumbed the TV dark and sat across from him with her chin in her hand. "I keep thinking about the way he looked at me," Jamal said. "Like I'd stolen something he was owed. Like the lane was tax he didn't consent to." Sienna exhaled. "You keep thinking about surviving," she countered. "About the truth you get to tell because you can. About the woman who put her car in front of a man's anger. About me and the stupid dog." He smiled for the first time in 12 hours, small and sideways. "Milo is not stupid," he lied. She reached her foot out and nudged his shin. He tried to climb into the fridge to get yogurt. "Cultured," Jamal said. It was a bad joke. It helped anyway. At noon, Ruiz called. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she began, and meant it. "We've got the liquor store camera, and I've pulled the dash from my sedan. We're still waiting on the bus footage. The DA wants to move fast. They may seek hate crime enhancements." Jamal's throat tightened. Because of the word he mouthed? "Because of a pattern," Ruiz said. "Mr. Anders has 2 prior complaints for menacing cyclists. Neither stuck, no injury, no officer on scene to witness. Also, my detectives found a private social account, memes, certain flags in the garage. He didn't ask for the list. He knew the list. What about the texts?" he asked. "If he sent me something—" "Save everything," Ruiz said. "Don't answer. We'll pull phone records with a warrant if the DA goes that way." When Ruiz hung up, Sienna leaned back and studied Jamal like she was making a sketch. "Do you want to ride?" she asked. The thought flooded him with shame and longing. He had always ridden when he needed to make sense of the city, the river run, the climb to the bluff, the sprint that sent lactic acid down his legs like fire that hurts in a good way. Now his bike sat on the stand with its imperfect wheel. "I don't know how," he admitted. "Then let's learn," she said. They rolled out at dusk, slow. Jamal chose the streets on purpose. The easy lanes, the wide shoulders, the blocks where he knew the air by smell. He kept his head on a swivel and hated himself for it. At a red light, a woman in a minivan lifted 2 fingers piece, solidarity, habit. Jamal lifted 2 back and felt something in his chest, ease, a notch. Behind them, an engine revved. Jamal's neck went cold. The minivan moved forward on green. A pickup slid in from an angle, and a man shouted out the window something that might have been, "Ride the sidewalk," or might have been nothing at all. Jamal's legs responded like they had since he was 12. Spin, don't swerve. Make yourself a straight line, and then they cleared the block, and he found his breath again. They stopped at the river, because that's what you do in Riverton when you don't know where else to point your body. Sienna laid her bike down and stood with her elbows on the rail. "You don't have to be brave all at once," she said. He nodded. "I'm tired of being a lesson," he said softly. "I just want to be a person on a bike." Sienna's mouth softened. "You are. And tomorrow you'll still be. That man's story doesn't become your definition. At home, the puppy did something stupid with a shoe and made them laugh hard enough to shake the day loose." Jamal slept, and when he woke at 3 a.m., he walked to the window and looked down at the street like he expected to see headlights sitting still. He watched for 5 minutes, then 10, then told himself a story about how most nights end without anyone deciding to end someone else. He climbed back into bed before the story could collapse. In the morning, the city had opinions again and used them like currency. A cycling club organized a slow roll at the scene for Saturday. Bells instead of horns, kids with handlebar streamers, a sea of neon vests making visibility into a protest. Ruiz RSVP'd privately and planned to stand back because there are times when a badge can guard and times when it distorts. Cole Anders posted a statement written by his lawyer where he said, without saying, that he'd been terrified by an individual who veered unpredictably, that he regretted any distress, that he was committed to sharing the road, and de-escalation. Commenters who looked like his neighbors liked it with little thumbs. At the end of the post, Anders added a single unscripted sentence, "I will not be made into your villain." Jamal read it twice. He thought not for the first time that men, like Anders, always imagine someone else is writing the story where their choices are ink. He closed the app, stood, and went to his front wheel. He trued it again until the wobble shrank to almost nothing, then mounted the tire and snapped the lever closed. He spun it and watched the black line blur into a circle. He decided the slow roll would have his body in it, even if his heartbeat tried to jump out of his throat the entire time. He texted Ruiz, "Saturday. I'll be there." "Good," she wrote back. "The river path is good for organizing." Then she added, "and for breathing." Saturday came bright and windy, the kind of sky that photographs well. 200 riders gathered at Jefferson and King, with helmets mostly on straight, infants strapped into trailers, retired men in jerseys from races 20 years gone. Jamal wore plain black and kept his chin level. People tried to press cups of coffee into his hand. He took one and dumped it when his fingers shook. Sienna rode beside him dressed like any citizen. No signs, no slogans, just a human whose presence refused to let a narrative drift. Detective Ruiz watched from a half-block back, in jeans and a windbreaker that didn't advertise her job. Her eyes kept count, without conscious thought. Points of friction, street cut-ins, the posture of drivers waiting at cross streets. The unmarked sedan idled 2 blocks away with another detective at the wheel because Ruiz had insisted on redundancy. It felt like carrying an umbrella when the forecast said 0% overcautious until the sky chose a mood. As they rolled, bells chimed like laughter. The crowd hummed, the city paused, and for a few blocks the power felt pointed in a different direction toward protecting small bodies and the space a bicycle occupies. Jamal let his eyes slide left to the river and found his breath landing clean for the first time in days. On the far side of the bridge, a man stepped out from behind a pole and held up a sign hand-lettered in a stuttering script. "I saw IT." He wore a denim jacket and fatigue like a heavy backpack. His name, Jamal would learn, was Clarence. He had been on the bus Tuesday night, phone dead, grief alive. He waved the sign like a person drowning would wave a bright cloth. Reese saw him first and moved with that quiet speed that keeps things from becoming a headline. She cut the crowd's edge and reached him with a nod. "You were there?" she asked. Clarence's eyes flicked to the wheels streaming past. "I saw the SUV block him," he said. "I saw that man back up like he was playing with a dog. I saw the lady," he gestured toward Ruiz's shape without knowing who she was, "put her car in the way. I thought, Jesus, I thought, not again." "Will you give a statement?" Ruiz asked. "On paper?" He hesitated. The world had taught him about paper. It had taught him about which stories count and which get filed under unreliable narrator, for reasons no one named, but everyone understood. Ruiz read the math on his face and offered him a pen like a lifeline instead of a weapon. "You get to be the one to tell what your eyes saw," she said, "not what somebody decides you meant." Clarence's shoulders dropped a fraction. "Okay," he said. "Yeah." They pulled to the curb, and Jamal unclipped and coasted on instinct. He didn't know why he'd stopped until he found himself next to them. Clarence looked from Ruiz to Jamal to the bike like the world had arranged a sentence with subject, verb, and object. "You okay, kid?" he asked. Jamal hated the kid and loved it at the same time. "I'm writing," Jamal said, which was true and enough. They moved on. The slow roll circled back toward Jefferson as cameras, phones, local news, a photographer with a lens longer than Jamal's forearm clicked and whirred. A group of drivers waited at an intersection with expressions that ranged from tolerance to impatience. One revved his engine in a way that made the hair on Jamal's arms lift. Ruiz turned her head, caught his eyes with hers, and shook her head once. No. The man held his rev a heartbeat longer, and then let it die. A small victory. A necessary one. By afternoon, the DA had filed an additional charge that the news anchors all said with a hush, hate crime enhancement, based on evidence reflective of bias. The city split itself predictably. Certain podcasts clutched pearls about overreach. Certain corners of the internet cheered like the charge itself was a conviction. Ruiz did not cheer. She knew enhancers were delicate things, true in the bone, hard to prove in court where language must dress itself up as evidence. Monday's arraignment turned into a bail hearing, then into the kind of preliminary where lawyers try out sentences for the trial to come. Dwyer argued that the unmarked car had escalated, that Anders had panicked, that cyclists behaved like sovereign citizens of asphalt. The assistant DA, a woman named Khalid with a voice that didn't care to rise, laid out footage in a stack, the liquor store angle where Anders' SUV drifted, not once, but twice, the dash cam with audio that captured the sound of engine and breath, the bus lens where Clarence's profile leaned forward as if willing time to slow. When Khalid paused a liquor store clip at the exact frame where Anders' wheels knifed left, the room tightened. She let the silence hold. A weapon, she said simply. A choice. The judge a man whose hair had surrendered and whose patience had not leaned forward. "Counselor," he said to Dwyer, "you keep saying panic. Panic doesn't look like aiming." Dwyer smiled like he couldn't quite keep it off his face. "Respectfully, Your Honor, we'll show the court that camera angles can't capture fear." "Respectfully," the judge said, "they capture proximity." Ruiz sat on the back bench, hands open on her knees. Jamal sat 3 rows up with Sienna's shoulder pressed to his. He felt small and enormous in alternating waves. He looked at Anders at the way he stared at the table instead of at Jamal, and wondered what it must be like to be publicly told that the story you wrote yourself into is being revised by strangers. As they stepped out into the hallway after cameras found them like rain, Khalid moved with the practiced deflection of a person who would never try this case on the steps. Jamal considered stopping to speak. He thought about all the times the city had used other men's names as chew toys for a week, and then spit them out when the next story came. He thought of Clarence's sign and Ruiz's palm on a hood, and he decided if he would speak, it would be later, when the words could inhabit a room where people couldn't scroll past them. That night, someone slid a note under Sienna's door. "Go back to the sidewalk." It was cut from magazine letters like a high school play about crime. Sienna called Ruiz without drama. Ruiz added it to a file that was getting heavier. "You okay?" Ruiz asked. "Define okay," Jamal said, and even he heard the thin joke in it. "Okay means you get up tomorrow and eat eggs," Ruiz said, "and you don't read the comments." "What about the parts where a woman blocks a car and saves my life?" Jamal asked, surprising himself. Ruiz didn't pause. "You get up and remember that, too." Trial did not come in a week. It arrived the way justice often does late, then all at once. In the months between, life insisted on itself. Jamal fixed 100 wheels, each one a quiet ceremony. He rode when he could and didn't apologize when he couldn't. Sienna started a neighborhood safety map with dots for trouble and paths for ease, an art project disguised as a public service. Ruiz worked other cases, missing things and broken windows, and the kind of crimes you don't make TV about, and checked in without hovering. Clarence found his voice the way a person finds a song they used to know. He testified at the grand jury in a suit that belonged to his brother and arrived at court on the day of trial with a neatly folded statement he never needed to look at. Cole Anders, constrained by the measurements of a courtroom, looked smaller. He did not post anymore. He had learned that declarations written in the heat of a Tuesday night become weapons in someone else's hands under Wednesday noon lights. He wore a tie like remorse. It hung crooked. Jamal took the stand on the second day. He did not look at Anders. He talked about lanes and hand signals and the way steel moves when it wants to. He talked about the first time he rode with his father along the same river, the way they'd pointed at mergansers and laughed, the way the talk had included cars alongside cops. "You are soft, son, the world is not." He did not cry. He did not perform terror. He let the facts sit with their own gravity. Dwyer tried to rough the edges of the story. "You're a courier," he said. "You get paid to be fast." "I get paid to be careful," Jamal said. "Fast only works if you live." "You raised your voice," Dwyer suggested. "I asked for space," Jamal answered. "You gestured." "I signaled," Jamal said, and lifted his hand in the precise, right-angled way a driver's ed teacher would draw on a chalkboard, letting the jury see the difference between a threat and a law. Khalid played the dash audio. Ruiz's voice filled the room. "Police. Hands where I can see them." Jamal felt tears sting then. Unexpectedly not at the command, but at the way care can sound like authority when it needs to. He swallowed and kept his face steady. Ruiz watched a muscle jump in her own jaw on the screen and decided with a private cruelty to forgive herself for not being perfect. The jury took a day and a half because 12 people trying to see the same movie in one frame is always going to take longer than anyone wants. They came back with words that felt both too small and exactly right. Guilty on assault with a deadly weapon. Guilty on reckless endangerment. Enhancement found true. The judge spoke in the old cadence. The law, the facts, the sentence. Anders got time, real time, not just weekends and probation with conditions that sounded like the city trying to teach a man how to be ordinary without being dangerous. He was ordered to a road safety course that would put him in a chair in front of a woman with a laser pointer who would talk about stopping distances and blind spots. He would watch videos where cyclists are people with faces. He would not be a villain in the film. He would be the man in the back row who knows the camera could turn on him at any moment. After, on the courthouse steps, Jamal faced a sea of microphones and chose the tightest string between truth and mercy. "I lived," he said. "That's the headline. I lived because a detective put a car between me and someone else's anger. I lived because a stranger on a bus saw and spoke. I lived because 1,000 people rode slow and made room. I don't know if that changes a man like Mr. Anders, but it changes me. I'm going to keep riding. I'm going to keep asking for space. And I'm going to make space, too." A reporter asked if he forgave Anders. Jamal exhaled. "Forgiveness isn't a press conference," he said gently. "It's a long ride. Some days you have a headwind." He stepped back. Sienna's hand found his. Milo would eat a sock tonight, and they would both pretend to be shocked. Ruiz watched from the edge, a small figure in a crowd, and felt an old steadiness settle in her bones. She thought of how many stories don't end like this. Not neatly, not with sentences you can lean on without splinters. She thought of the skid marks on Jefferson and how rain had washed them lighter, but not away. She thought of the way a badge is a promise that's heavier on the days you keep it. That evening, Jamal went to the river alone. He wore a windbreaker and no headphones. He rode the path where the city practices remembering it's beautiful. He stopped at the bridge and looked down at the water worrying itself into waves against the pier. The wind smelled like copper again. A car pulled into the lot behind him and idled. Jamal's body braced animal, involuntary. He turned, the unmarked gray sedan. Ruiz stepped out and lifted a hand. She didn't come closer. She didn't say anything. She stood at the rail 10 feet away and watched the light take its time leaving. "Long turn," Jamal said after a while, not looking at her. "Always is," Ruiz replied. They were quiet until the first stars peered through the mesh of cloud like shy eyes. Jamal swung a leg over his bike and clipped in. He pushed off into the lane with a cadence that felt like prayer. He did not ride fast. He rode true. At the top of the small hill, he glanced back and saw Ruiz in her sedan, headlights low, giving him distance and her presence at the same time. He smiled despite himself at the paradox of it. He pointed his wheel toward home, toward Sienna's lamp in the window, toward a road where tomorrow a driver might hesitate a second longer at a cross street because a story had crept under his skin, where a kid might raise 2 fingers and mean it, where a man like Jamal, just a person on a bike, could take up the space a life needs and not apologize for it. And the city, which had almost made him into a headline and then, miraculously, into a man again, breathed out with him.